Today, we're looking at Krishna's Ghat Green. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Krishna's Ghat Green is a part of their specialty series of inks and is a green ink. And to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Nimacine Singularity with a fine nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a very light gray across the bottom, some yellow up into the green, but there's no actual blue in making this. So this is a green with some other mixes in it. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the only difference between the two of them is that gray line on the bottom is very distinct and very there. It truly makes me feel like this ink might have a little bit of resistance to it. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let my smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I get a rather surprising result when I think about what happened with that green, or with the gray at the bottom. The capital H is, I'm going to call it unreadable, because if I didn't know what it was, I might start losing what I had. If somebody else had to read my notes, they might not be able to get everything that's being written if this is what happens to all of my writing. So I would avoid this ink in a note-taking situation where you might want to go back and highlight. Water reactivates and lifts a great deal of this ink. Now when you look carefully, you see some of the white of the paper coming through. Little bits of the white of the paper, not tons, but it does make me confident that water is all that it would take to remove this. Pen flush surprisingly did less than water did, which sometimes we have seen. So pen flush is not a magic solution after water. Bleach completely obliterates it, leaves a clean white circle where the ink used to be. But more on the idea that water is all that it takes to clean this out of your pens. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Krishna's Ghat Green has a viscosity of 2.04, which makes it a wetter ink. Now to find my dry times, I average my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. For the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Krishna's Ghat Green has a dry time of 16 seconds, making it a very normal ink. Now let's look at the writing samples. So I picked this ink up in bottle form because when I was ordering it, I was ordering tons and tons of their inks before we could get samples here in the US. I'm glad I have this as a bottle, not a sample. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and crazy shading all over. This ink, the whole way through in these writing samples, is going to be amazing in what it does. This is a gorgeous green ink. I'm just going to put that there right now. This is a gorgeous green ink. If you like green ink, you need this bottle. If you like shading, you need this bottle. Don't get the samples, get the bottle, because you're going to use it up fast. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, crazy shading all over the place. Quick, starts out very light at the top, gets dark at the bottom. The U gets light, the IC gets dark, but the K gets super dark. And it's like that all over. 10 seconds to dry. Now a noticeably darker tone with the medium, with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Very little shading to be seen. We do see in quick the top is a little lighter, the top of the U is a little lighter, the beginning of B in brown is a little lighter. Not a lot of the shading here, but it was going on wet. 15 seconds to dry. Yes, I smudged it. The scrubby for the extra fine it shows us color variation, not nearly what we saw in the writing. The medium shows us none. We really didn't get very much. The smear test, you could probably recover it if you smeared. Tomoe River, no bleeding. Yes, we get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer some shading, very light shading. I'm going to casual shading. The H is darker than the N or the S. The H is darker than the G or the A. The E's are darker than the E and the N. It's very nice. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We don't get any shading with this writing sample. Extra fine on this paper. The paper to me kills the shading. It lets it lie on top for too long while it's drying and it levels out. 16 seconds to dry. Noticeably darker tone with the medium. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And again, this paper is just eating up the shading. It's gone. It's a lovely tone. It's a very nice tone of green, but it ate up the shading. 29 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us not a lot of color variation. We didn't get any color variation. The smear test says you likely can't recover it. Rhodia. Bleed spot on the scrubby, that's where I'm putting it down stupid thick, so that doesn't really count. Other than that, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, beautiful shading the whole way through. Just like we saw with the Clairefontaine. Extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, we get some beautiful shading all the way through this writing. It's not as drastic as we saw with the Clairefontaine. But I'm going to tell you, when I use this with a singularity, when it has a dry, fine nib, hold on, beautiful shading the whole way through. Just gorgeous. Gorgeous. So it's here, but it's way more over there on my notes. 10 seconds to dry. Noticeably darker tone with the medium. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby, for both, don't show us very much color variation, although we do see it in the extra fine, not in the scrubby. And the smear test says you could likely recover it. So I test this out on some different tone papers, like the yellow Rhodia, which gives no bleeding, no ghosting. But what happens to the color? It's the same. This is a rich color. It's a very rich color. It's very strong. It doesn't really get altered by the tones underneath. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, it gives a little more shading on the yellow paper, and it's beautiful. The G, the loop at the top of the G is darker than the down swoop or up swoop. The loop at the bottom of the G is darker. The R is lighter. The E's get darker again. Beautiful. Extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And yes, beautiful shading all the way through it. Over is a great example. Starts very light, gets darker all the way through it. Brown starts dark, gets light all the way through it. Quick shows multiple tones within the same letters. Very nice. Very, very nice. 10 seconds to dry. Medium is a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no color variation. The wetter pens, it's not giving us the color variation. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine and the medium don't really show us much color variation, but the extra fine did in the writing sample. That's why that is my #1 way to really look at an ink over anything else, writing samples. The smear test, I don't think on yellow paper you would be able to recover it. So I decided to look at this on the hazel paper. The hazel paper is the notebooks I bought when I bought ink from them. They had notebooks for sale on their site. You should get them. They perform great, especially the pocket size, although I wish I could get it larger because it performs so well. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It only took 4 seconds to dry. Very noticeably darker tone with the medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows us that we don't get much color variation. We didn't. The smear test, I believe you could recover it. So this is Bristol board paper. I use it a lot for when I'm just doing my own artwork. So I like to see how it works. How does it perform? Well, no bleeding, no ghosting. It's a super heavy paper. I'm really not expecting that. I would be surprised if it came through with anything other than a paintbrush. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. And this is where shading really matters more to me. Excuse me, because it's really nice if you're doing artwork to be able to get it to shade from very dark where you put it out. If you can get it to shade and blend itself out with a little bit of water, then it makes your life so much easier. But we have no shading here. 7 seconds for the extra fine. The medium, way dark tone. Way dark tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 10 seconds to dry, which is not bad at all when we're dealing with doing art. A lot of times when you work with ink, doing art, you give it 24 hours before you do anything else. Now the scrubbies, the extra fine shows us some color variation, but we didn't get it in the writing. The medium shows us none, and we didn't get any. The smear test, I believe you could recover the extra fine and not the medium. And that's all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Krishna's Ghat Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now this is a dark green, however, in different nibs it's not always as dark, and with that it can handle its own against a very black ink, which made me choose Noodler's Borealis Black. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Krishna's Ghat Green? I think it is great performance matched with great shading. This green is absolutely fantastic. I got one problem with this green, and that's those tiny little bottles that Krishna sells them in. This is an amazing green ink in what it looks like and everything about it. I love this green ink. The amount of shading, the different tones you get for using different nibs, and with those different tones, you still get a bunch of shading. It's truly spectacular. Thanks for watching.